Gayle Saunders, Eagle Sessions here with Mal Davis, talking the NFL draft. I know I'm a draft head. Mal is a draft head. How you doing today, man?
Doing well, brother. Just glad to be able to connect with you today. Talk a little bit of Eagles, a little bit of draft, and just enjoying life, man. It's a nice day.
Yeah, man. What you guys didn't see before this was a 2 hour breakdown of trying to get an idea of maybe the top 10 prospects that we thought were going to be in range for the Philadelphia Eagles, looking at the board and kind of figuring out what talent fit and what talent was actually that we felt was a good value at the number 32 spot. Was that an easy task for you, Mal?
Definitely not. It was time consuming. It was fun. I enjoyed it.
It was fun.
The back and forth conversation definitely was awesome. But no, it wasn't easy. There's so many good players. It's hard to whittle it down to 10, roughly 10 people.
And coming from a chart, and a lot of people will talk about the Eagles need offensive linemen.
Mhm.
The running back is not a good value in the
Right.
first round. We need a linebacker, maybe
Right.
a safety. You know, thinking about the whole board and thinking about offensive linemen, as I first mentioned, we kind of came together with an idea that some of the linemen that we thought were in value weren't going to be there. And we talked about Mike McGlinchey, a guy that was recently mocked to us by Bucky Brooks. How do you feel about Mike McGlinchey?
Like we talked about earlier, I like McGlinchey. I think that he is a really strong tackle prospect. He's somebody I think if he falls to 32, he ranks above quite a few of the players we're going to talk about in a moment. I don't think he makes it that far. I think that his athleticism plus his tape and just his proven ability to play, tackle, will get him drafted in the top 20 picks, in my opinion,
Hmm.
25 at the worst. If he falls to 32, I would be shocked. But I would also welcome it. Obviously it's a need, but again, he was one of the people that we felt probably went too early, and then Crosby, like you mentioned, maybe too late. So, there weren't too many people in that, like literally the 32 round that we could really pick from.
I mean, the other player that we had in there was Connor Williams out of
Right.
Texas, a guy that we also thought could get drafted before we're picking at number 32.
Right.
Uh, you know, Talking about a prospect that who's been mentioned a lot and being connected with the Eagles at the 32 pick, a guy who's been in for a official team visit, a guy who they flew down to go see in at LSU. They were at his pro day. Um, the guy's name, and also everyone keeps saying that he's my son, Darius Geis. Your feelings on Darius Geis?
I like Geis a lot, especially at the 32 pick. As we talked about already, I'm not a person that believes in devaluing a running back strictly because of the position that they play. If they are amongst the best players available at whatever pick you have, um, you should feel good about selecting them. Geis to me is a top 15 talent. Like, he isn't so far behind Saquon Barkley that he isn't a first round pick. I see some people talking about him as a second rounder. I disagree. I think at 32, he would be ideal. He is a proven running back. He's potentially like a third down back, like you mentioned, a rookie contract. So he makes some of our other running backs expendable. Don't have to re-sign Ajayi. Like he gives us options at the position, and he runs like a madman. He ran for over 2,638 rushing yards, or for 2,638 yards at LSU in his 2 years after Fournette. That's production too.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
he brings it. He runs like he's pissed off at the whole entire world. And
Yeah.
those are the things that make you successful in the NFL.
And when the media is talking about some of the recent stuff, like the off the field stuff
Right.
with Darius Geis, his brother was involved in like a drive-by shooting.
Right.
Multiple run-ins with the law. His father was murdered at a
Hmm.
young age. He's come from a rough upbringing, but he kind of like channels his anger into his running style.
Right.
He's a big fan of Marshawn Lynch. If
Right.
people have the WW What Would Jesus Do bands, he would have the band WWML for What Would Marshawn Lynch Do. And that I see when I see him run, I feel like he's trying to get every inch of the yard on every single carry. Sometimes takes on a little bit too much contact. I mean, you're thinking about longevity of a prospect. He dealt with some injuries as well, but he's a maniac, man. I mean,
Yeah.
he's the one of the only running backs in SEC history. Now we're talking the SEC. We're not talking about the Big 12 or the SEC. One of the only prospects to have three rushing yards. I mean, 3 games over 250 yards.
Hmm.
250 yards. That's a lot of yards in the SEC.
Right.
So hats off to Darius Geis. I feel like a lot of people are starting to fall in love with that name at 32, and they could have their
Right.
heart broken.
Yeah, it's possible. And I mean, to talk a little bit about the character stuff, like the him being asked if he was gay at the combine, but even more specifically, like his family members being murdered and things like that. We hold that against these young men, and that's unfair because so many of them are overcoming
Right.
those circumstances and those situations and those communities against all odds, right? And so for him to make it to this point, and despite all of these potential distractions, none of it has distracted him.
Right.
For better or worse, he's been someone that LSU vouches for, the coaching staff believes in. Nobody really has much to say negative about the kid. So, I would love for the perception around a lot of that stuff to change,
Hmm.
because, we can't continue to shame these men as they try to do better things for themselves, because then we take away the incentive for them to do that, right? Allow these young men to prove that despite where you're from, you deserve these opportunities. And I think that that's the case with Geis. He's overcome a lot in his life. And like you said, he runs like he's trying to prove it every single play. And I welcome that on the Eagles. I don't think he would be a distraction whatsoever.
And I mean, you look at a Dalvin Cook who was in a
Right.
lot of people's eyes a first round talent, slip into the second round. Because some of the the off field things that were going on, but he could have been rookie of the year if
Balling.
he didn't get injured.
Balling.
Um, Another player that you're a big fan of, I think you're part of the Will Hernandez fan club. Will
God
Hernandez
right there.
is a guard. He's a mauler, and
Yep.
he plays angry, and he plays to the whistle, and he will beat your ass up.
Yep.
Mal, tell us what you like about Will Hernandez.
And really, the last piece is what you say. He'll beat you up. And so he has really solid technique. He uses his hands well. My comparison for him is Kelechi Osemele, the guard from the Raiders. When they lock into you and they can get their hands on you, they'll move you wherever they need to move you, and that's dangerous for opposing defensive linemen. Hernandez, his size 6'2", 327. So he's a bigger dude, very strong guy.
Mhm.
And like you say, he plays nasty to the whistle. Every single play was on the 0-12, I believe, UTEP team. And when you watch his tape, you would think they were competitive in every single game. And you catch the scoreboard in the little side of it, and you know that that's not the case. But like he's literally playing hard into the fourth quarter of games that are absolutely meaningless. And so those are the things that I look for. Those are the plus things. Those are the intangibles that you look for when you want to project somebody to the NFL. And he has this sort of demeanor that will fit in really well with the Eagles' offensive lineman. He's going to come in. He's a lunch pail kind of guy. Like, he's just going to work hard,
Yep.
and just continue to get better at his craft. And I think that that's what you look for again for interior linemen, especially. And he has that without a question.
Yeah, and I think when people are thinking about who are the other potential guard prospects, a lot of people have Isaiah Wynn out of
Hmm.
Georgia, who is a tackle, but they're talking about kicking him
Taking them
inside
in.
to play
Right.
guard. So I feel like Wynn would be the most targeted piece,
Hmm.
probably before Hernandez, and then also Connor Williams, another offensive line we just recently spoke about,
Right.
is another guy that they could kick in inside or play
Right.
left tackle or right tackle. So Hernandez is on that. If teams aren't looking for a guard, he
Right.
could slide down into our range. Um,
A 4 year starting at left guard at UTEP. You if you are looking for a traditional guard prospect,
right.
and like for better or worse, they've lost popularity because you can kick a really good tackle inside, and like we're seeing them be successful doing that. But if you're looking for a guard, specifically a left guard that can
Yeah.
walk in and like day one kick somebody's ass in training camp and take their job from them, is Will Hernandez, and like that's what we're looking for, in
Yeah.
my opinion. You have Wisniewski, you have some people that can continue to stabilize that position, but Wisniewski has what 1 year on his deal left. I believe he's 29
Right.
now, so he's getting close to that 30-year mark, which is less important for linemen, but nonetheless, if you could slide a Will Hernandez in to start for the next 4 to 5 years, what are we talking about? Now we can focus on left tackle and potentially that whole left side of our offensive line is solidified for the future.
And that's something that we kind of think about our picks when we put this whole list together, like a Geist, and you look at the Ajayi situation
Right,
and Corey Clement, who's costing you not very much,
right,
and Ajayi's looking for another contract after this year.
yep,
You think about players that can take over the position a year in advance, like when the Eagles came up with the 14th pick, they got Derek Barnett, and they look into the future and they see Curry, who is no longer with his team. They knew that there was a chance that he might not be on the squad
yep.
this year. And like I've always said, Howie is a step ahead of all of us. So when in terms of thinking about players that might not be on this roster, moving on to the next player, Leighton Vander Esch, and a guy
Right.
like
It's my boy.
Michael Kendricks, who's been talked about being moved for so damn long. A guy like Leighton Vander Esch. If you look at a game like his performance in Oregon, he was all over the place. A guy with 1 year production,
Mm.
a former safety. Um, you know, he went to Boise State. Like in high school, I think he played like 8-man football.
Hmm.
So I mean, a lot of people are wondering how he got there and why he didn't. I mean, he showed tons. He's like a size speed prospect, and I feel
Mm.
like you know I'm not as high on as Leighton Vander Esch as some might be, but I do see what NFL teams like in him. What do you like about LVE?
So I got a chance to do a actual draft profile for LVE for Fourth and John. So I had the opportunity to watch several games of his from 2017. So again, like you said, 1 year of production. The big thing is that he did it a bunch of different ways. So 4 sacks, 5 breakups, 91 solo tackles. Like he does it a bunch of different ways. And something that I love about linebackers is that they flash all over the place. A lot of people talk about sideline to sideline football, and he's definitely a sideline to sideline defender. He's someone I think that really, I mean, when I'm looking at a 4-3 defense, I also think he might be able to play some Mike linebacker for you, right? And so we're talking about
Right.
Jordan Hicks, who I love Jordan Hicks. I was a huge fan of Jordan Hicks coming out of high school, even at Texas, but he's had an issue with injuries even since Texas. And so insurance at all three linebacker positions would be huge. Van Der Esch is probably best as like a strong side linebacker, but he could play weak side. He could play inside. He can pass rush. He can drop into coverage. He can come down and run support. On your traditional first and second down base formations potentially. So he's versatile. Again, that 1 year production, like you said, worries me, but quite a few of the guys that we'll talk about today
Right.
only have like one true year of production. So again, a lot of it is how do they project to the system? How do they project to the team? How do they project to the NFL?
Speaking of linebackers in 1 year of production, our next guy on the list, um, Rashawn Evans, another
Yep.
linebacker for you linebacker lovers out there. A lot of people talk about linebackers for the Eagles.
Right.
Rashawn Evans, you think about Alabama and you think about linebackers. They're like in the same sentence, like the same breath, because that's where a lot of these top-notch linebackers come from. And you think about the guys Reuben Foster,
Hmm.
Sean Dion Hamilton, another guy who got injured. That's how Rashaan Evans got on the field.
Hmm.
And he didn't get to start until his senior year, but they were using him as a situational pass rusher. I know some teams out there have seen Rashaan Evans as a pass rusher. So I mean, he has that size that you like, the ability to come rush the quarterback in passing situations if you need a guy like that. But he also shows the ability and athleticism in space that I think teams fall in love with.
Hmm.
And he's a thumper too. Like he does
Right.
miss some tackles, but he gives you that, like when you see a linebacker, you see a guy make a tackle. That's what you want to see from your linebackers. How do you
Right.
feel about Rashaan Evans?
I like Evans. I think he would be another strong fit for the Eagles. I don't think he's as heavy of a hitter as Foster was.
Right,
Like
right.
just remember
Oh
watching
no,
film on Foster.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
I'm surprised he didn't catch a case off of some of those
yeah,
hits,
yeah,
man. Like some of that looked like murder on tape.
yeah.
So he isn't that. But what he is a versatile guy, like you said. A lot of what you see from him is him coming downhill towards a ball carrier, towards a quarterback. Um, and I don't really have an issue with that. I mean, 13 tackles for loss, that jumps out to me as a player that can make tackles, obviously, behind the line of scrimmage. And so initially, the question would be, okay, how do you deploy him to get the best out of him early on in his career? Um, but much like Van Der Esch, I think he could play all three positions. I think he could play some Mike for you if you gave him a chance to learn the system and you had him learn behind the Hicks, had him learning behind the Kendricks and with a Bradham. Like there's a lot of knowledge there that can help him become a better football player. But to be a starter at any point in time at Alabama means that you beat out the best players in the country for that position for that year. So, it did take him 4 years to become a starter, but like he got that crown and he held it down. And so I can definitely see how he could be productive for us as a two down linebacker to start, but growing into like a three down role in the future.
Uh, and speaking of defensive players, the Eagles. If you look at our pre-draft visits, we have on Fourth and John. You can check out our pre-draft visits.
Definitely
Uh,
check it out.
the Eagles have done a lot of homework on slot cornerbacks heading
Hmm.
into the draft. And me and Mal talking about our potential slot cornerbacks are,
Yeah.
we'll start with Mal's favorite out of the group that we've come up with.
Okay.
Um, Mike Hughes.
It's my boy, man.
Tell us about your son, Mike Hughes.
On field, right? Like I don't know the off field stuff, the red
Right.
flag stuff. I can't attest to that. I don't vouch for that in any way, shape, or no way whatsoever. But on field, Mike Hughes for me represents exactly what I look for in a slot corner. Shouts out to Kelly from Fourth and John. I saw her. She had a post about quite a few of the cornerbacks that she wouldn't mind being on the team, and she had Mike and another one of them that we'll talk about in a second listed. So shouts to her too. I like Mike. He plays a ton outside. He reminds me of like a Joe Hayden light almost.
Hmm.
I can see how he could kick inside and be really successful in our system. The biggest thing for me is that he's aggressive. He plays hard. When you see wide receivers stepping up to block him in the run game, like he's literally bowling people over, like running through them to get to the ball carrier. On screen passes, he's attacking the ball carrier at the legs, bringing them down. And he delivers a pop every time he shows up to the football, including his on ball skills. He was able to pull in 4 interceptions and return one for a touchdown this season. So, he can also play the position from a technical standpoint as well. And like I said, I prefer him over your boy, who we'll talk about in a second. But, he isn't the same athlete that Alexander is. But to me, he's a better football player.
And now, some of the off-field stuff that we are talking about. There was a sexual assault
Right,
case that actually got dropped because there wasn't really a credible evidence.
right,
People in the North Carolina program have all vouched for him, and the UCF
right.
program have all vouched for him. But he felt it was a good idea to transfer and go to a different school.
Right.
which a change of scenery, and he's excelled. I feel
Absolutely.
like he's got that punt returning, kick return ability. It's
Right.
pretty tremendous, and I feel like the one difference between I think Jair Alexander and Mike Hughes, I think uh, you know Alexander gives you a little bit better uh, um, coverage and zone. But I feel like when players get down to us, each player has warts that you have to figure out which is
Right.
more detrimental to you or like. But I think Jair Alexander, runs a 4.38. He's got
Mm-hmm.
that. He's very twitchy.
Yep.
I think he's good at mirroring guys in coverage. I think
Yep.
he can give you the best of both worlds in man coverage and zone coverage. I think he is a little bit smaller of a corner. You want a little bit
Mm-hmm.
a guy with more physicality. He can get bodied out by bigger receivers. We've
Right.
seen, but a dynamic playmaker. He's scrappy, feisty. Reminds me of a Schwartz guy when I see him right off the back. I'm like, this guy
Mm-hmm.
has the same thing when I seen Jalen Mills in training
Yeah.
camp.
Jalen Mills. Right.
I instantly thought that this guy has the same demeanor as a Jalen Mills and kind of that edge. And there's like some players just have edge,
Mm-hmm.
and I felt like
They got
Alexander
that
had
dog.
that.
Got that dog in them.
Yeah, he dealt with injuries, so his junior was where he was most productive, and I think a lot of people have him. Some people have him higher up on the first round, but I feel like teams are like draft analysts out there are all projecting him to succeed at the next level.
Mm-hmm.
And then again, he's also great returner as well. Like
Right.
he can take it to the house.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, it was so funny trying to get our players together for the list. Like we could it took us like 2 hours,
It
really.
did. I mean, and like I like Jair Alexander. And like I said, my comp for him, for better or worse, is Justin Gilbert because I see like the athleticism that it takes. And I went and looked at combine numbers and just out of curiosity, I mean, almost the exact same. Um, Alexander is better three cones, so like short area quickness. But what I see is a guy that does not have sound technique because he doesn't need it, right? Like he's able to win because he's a better athlete than the vast majority of people that he'll line up against. Like you said, his 2016 tape was a lot better than 2017. 2017 he gets hurt actually returning. I believe it was a block punt or a punt of some sort. So his return ability is definitely legitimate. I love his mentality, like you said, the Jalen Mills comp. I certainly get that from a thought process standpoint. Like he has the dog in him. He's aggressive. My concern is that guys that rely strictly on athleticism don't translate the best into the NFL. Again, with Justin Gilbert, like we see what happened with him, right? Like he didn't want to work for it, and when it came time to being in camp with guys like a Jalen Mills, a much lower round prospect that's going to work every single day, you know, they wash out because they don't have the technique and the will to become better. I don't know that to be true about Alexander. If he does, then his skill set, he could become a lockdown corner. Just again, like I said, just watching him, I just haven't seen it.
Yeah, and like some people might be watching this video like, why are they talking about cornerbacks? Like we have so many cornerbacks.
The
I
future,
mean,
man.
we're talking future. We're talking
Yeah.
about how it makes sense. You look at the fact that the Eagles are potentially going to try and start Jalen Mills on the inside for as our slot corner. You talk about Ronald Darby not being on a. This is his last year of his rookie deal, but bringing in a player that the Eagles handpick to be their cornerback prospect. That's something that it's in their favor. They can get a guy that they feel like they can mold.
Right.
But I think the need for a nickel corner and a nickel defender is it's a real deal position. Not
Right.
everybody is created equal when playing in
Right.
the slot. Speaking of the secondary, another player that we had on our list, Justin Reed out of Stanford,
Hmm.
a guy that I felt was at the top of the second, maybe the bottom of the first, and
Right.
thinking about the Eagles' uh, love for versatility at the safety position, with
Yeah.
Malcolm Jenkins being all world at that. Um, you have Rodney McLeod, who's making around 9 mil, but in the next 2 years, the Eagles, if they keep Rodney McLeod or both safeties, you're talking at $40 million that we have allocated to our
Yeah.
safety position. Only way you get cheaper is to think through the draft, and
Yeah.
a versatile safety with Justin Reed who can play in the box. They had him out in the
Hmm.
slot. You think about the RPO game being hot these days. He can play the hang defender role.
Hmm.
He can play the Corey Graham role. If you're bringing in, you have we have the starters in place, and then you can have him and groom him along the way.
Yeah.
Your feelings on Justin Reed?
I feel similarly to the way that you do. Um, Again, I see him do a lot of different things. I don't see him be dominant at any one
Right.
of those things though. So he can come into the box, but he's not an exceptional tackler. He can step into the slot, but he's not an exceptional defender. He can play deep third, but he's not exceptional in the deep third. He doesn't show exceptional ball skills. He's not a blitzer. So he does a bunch of things pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
But I can't sit and say, hey, Justin Reed is this, right? Like he went to the combine, did well, 4.4, 40-yard dash. I love the 16 reps on the bench press. That's definitely important. So it shows that he could walk up and jam a defender in the slot or work well against the tight end in space too. So I see it again. The Corey Graham role. I think that that's a great comparison. Um, Long term, like you said, safety becomes an issue from a cost perspective, especially if you can fill that role with somebody in the draft that's younger, more athletic, also potentially more explosive. Justin Reed is definitely more athletic and explosive. The question is, what will he come to the Eagles and become long term? Is he McLeod and able to like thump? Is he Malcolm Jenkins and able to step up and cover consistently? Or will he consistently just stay a guy that can't really do either very, very well?
Yeah. Well, I mean, speaking of athleticism, moving on to our next prospect, a big fan. We're both big fans. DJ Moore out of Maryland.
Man, you already know.
Uh, he's our only wide receiver that we have on this list, folks.
Right.
We're thinking of the idea that another guy, Cortland Sutton, a guy from
Hmm.
SMU, might be in that range. We feel like DJ Moore could slide in range for us. I feel like as soon as watching his tape, I I,
Mm.
I get these Steve Smith,
Mm.
Stephon Diggs
I
vibes.
like it.
I feel like he gives you inside outside versatility. I
Hmm.
feel like you look at Nelson Aguilar run a jet sweep
Right.
versus a DJ Moore run a jet sweep. He's like a running back in space. When he gets in open field, he looks like a running back.
Yep.
And I think he's a playmaker, but he's a
Hmm.
dynamic piece that when you think of the future of this wide receiver group, he adds a whole different element from the rest of the guys that we have on this roster. Your thoughts on one of your favorite prospects that you would bang the table for?
Yeah, definitely banging the table for DJ Moore at 32. You listed pretty much everything. The one piece for me is that he's really an underrated route runner.
Hmm.
We look at all the highlights and we look at him breaking tackles and making huge plays and the Percy Harvin comps and the Stephon Diggs comps, but people neglect the fact that if you really watch DJ Moore play, like he's running quick outs, he's running deep outs, he's running slants, he's running comebacks, and like he's using these routes to build up over the game to like really make explosive plays on go routes to make a defender believe in his double route that like at the top of his route when he begins to break down that's legitimate because he can really run a comeback on you and beat you with that route. And so, those things I think people don't look at. And that's one of the main reasons why I believe DJ Moore would be worth the pick at 32 and is potentially more valuable than some of the other players being projected near him. Because he is actually a receiver and not just like an athlete playing the position. And like you said, at 6 foot 210, he also looks like a running back sometimes toting the rock. And so, with the
Okay.
run after catch ability, with his punt return ability, day one, you can kind of like I can already see Doug Peterson's mind spinning and like thinking of different ways to implement him to make defenses pay if they don't pay attention to him. So I think that that's what you want at 32. If you could get a guy like him there, that would be incredible. My heart breaks because more and more often now I'm seeing him being projected to the Cowboys
Oof.
with Dez being cut. So
Eesh.
that's killing me. So hopefully not that. And he falls to 32, and if he does, man, 100%, I think it's worth it.
And I feel like, you know, the Panthers have been
Yeah,
sniffing around
absolutely.
him as
Yep.
well. I feel like the Cowboys have also been sniffing around Leighton Vander Esch and
Hmm.
Cortland Sutton.
Yep.
So I feel like we'd be lucky to have DJ Moore slip to us that late.
Right.
And thinking about our next prospect on the list, Ronald Ronald Jones.
Hmm.
Actually, Ronald Jones out of USC.
Right.
He's a home run hitter type, one cut and go. Doesn't have exactly the wiggle as some of the other running backs, but you know, a lot of people are like, oh, he he wears number 25, and who's that remind you of off the
Hmm.
bat? Jamal.
Jamal Charles, of course.
Yeah, your feelings on Ronald Jones?
I'm not as high on Ronald Jones as a lot of other people
Yeah,
are. And I just want to state the fact now that he is not Jamal Charles. Jamal Charles was really like a
but they have
lightning sort of
but they
athlete.
but they have dreads though.
Yeah, they have dreads, like they have similar body types. So I understand the comparison. When you look at the tape, like I said, when you look at Jamal Charles from Texas, it was one plant gone, one plant gone. And so you wondered, okay, can he make multiple moves to get open, or is he going to be somebody that just jumps around behind the line of scrimmage to find a hole to get to the next level? Ronald Jones is more of a traditional running back in that his one plant, if he can't find a hole, like, he'll scrape and find another one to get free. But it's not a one plant and go. It's one plant and 6 yards, 12 yards, 14 yards, 6 yards, 8 yards, 2 yards, 1 yard. I don't see the explosiveness. I don't see the high caliber athlete. I don't see the pass game production. I don't see him as an exemplary pass blocker. So, I think that there are other people around him that are more worthy of that pick. And if you have him and Geist there, like it's not even a question. So for me, Jones barely made it on this list. Like he was one of those fringe guys that we that you snuck on
Yeah,
this. And,
yeah, yeah.
but I do see why people like him as a prospect. I don't think he's worth the pick at 32.
Yeah, I mean, there are some home run hitter type runs he's got. I just feel like
He has some, without a
he
question.
he's he would add like an electric dynamic to this offense. Um, and it's interesting as well. He had a official team visit with the squad.
Hmm.
Darius Guice had an official team visit with the squad.
Right.
Um, and then the next running back on our list. I mean, we got three running backs on this
We do.
list.
We do.
Sony Michelle, a guy that
Hmm.
I'm pretty high on. Like when in terms of like picking at 32, you were at the mercy of the board. So like
Hmm.
for me to like pick one player and like I don't know who's gonna be there.
Right.
It's so hard to like do a mock draft and like yeah, this guy at 32 is gonna be there. Like
Right.
it's so hard. Sony Michelle, one cut runner.
Hmm.
He's got some wiggle to him. He can get you more yards than he'll fight for the extra yard. I feel like he doesn't have as much um, wear and tear on his body.
Right.
Splitting carries with Nick Chubb. Um, and some other people like Nick Chubb better than Sony Michelle.
I'm
But
one of those people. From
yeah,
like a traditional running back
hmm
standpoint, yeah. Like if I'm looking for somebody I could turn around, And so to what you were saying before about Jones having breakaway runs, I mean, so does Nick Chubb, so does Royce Freeman. Like I'm not gonna call these dudes burners.
Hmm.
And they run similar 40s to what Jones does, right? It's just perception is different because of his body type. We want to compare him to people that are faster than he is and like make more explosive plays than I believe he's capable of. Whereas with Sony Michelle, he has the explosion that you would expect. I don't think that he projects as like a traditional running back. I don't want to turn around and give him the ball 300 times. I don't think that he's that type of grinder at the position. We were talking before, and like I kind of compare him to Kenyon Drake. I think he's a dude that is a good 1A if you have somebody that can like with Michelle and Clement, and then potentially like another somebody that could be a more of a bruising runner for the Eagles. I think that that's a great combination. But even for me, I don't think Sony Michelle comes in as like a starting running back. He's not the answer the way that the Geis is, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But he's definitely someone that has been over 1,000 yards twice at Georgia. Played really well this season and capitalized on the relationship that he had with Chubb. But I think both of them really helped each other. I think Chubb can succeed without Michelle. Michelle needs a Chubb type player.
Yeah. And Sony Michel was also mocked to the Philadelphia Eagles by Danielle Jeremiah in his last mock draft as well. So,
It
you
makes
know,
sense. I mean, I could definitely see it. Um, he's never had more than 220 carries in college. So, you're really projecting
yeah,
like 220 carries in the NFL is not a traditional like workhorse workload, right? You're talking 320, 350. So, at the max. So that means that at 220, he's splitting another 100, 120 carries with someone else at the very most. So that's a significant workload for him to be giving up, in my opinion. And again, I don't know if Sony Michelle is somebody that can carry the ball 300 times.
yeah. Stu Staley worked out both Michelle and Nick Chubb at their pro day.
Right.
Had some workouts with them. They both of those guys then get a team visit. But a lot of people are saying Michelle's a guy that you could draft in the second round.
Yeah.
But we had to slip on. We had like a 10A and 10B.
Yeah.
So we have 11. We say we're
Right.
talking top 10 here, but we got 11 guys, and our last prospect that slipped in was Dallas Goedert
hmm
out of South Dakota State. What do you like about Dallas Goedert?
The main thing, well, first of all, like his size, and then his catching ability, like you were talking about when we were chopping it up earlier. Like you see a lot of the highlight catches, one hand catches in traffic. Like you, I feel like you can project his skill set and his ability to the NFL and see where he could succeed. Even watching him, it's more athletic than Jason Witten, but like I could see some of that, right? Like putting him in a position where he'll just eat all day in the middle of the field because he's able to use his body size to box players out successfully. And like if you put the ball in his general range, like he's gonna catch it. Um, like I said earlier, that's also means you're drafting him higher than Zach Ertz. And that's kind of the piece for me is that this is not even a need as much as why would you address like Zach Ertz is one of our best players. And so I don't think spending a pick at 32 on a tight end is smart when this is a pretty deep class of tight ends that can contribute in a lot of different ways. So I like Golder. If we didn't have Ertz, I would say him number one because I think that he can contribute to an offense right away. But with Ertz in the fold, and especially since we've already given him an extension, I think that that's just a luxury that I don't even know if he's BPA at that point.
Yeah, I mean, I think just looking at his gameplay, I mean, one you like to see a prospect from the lower ranks like
hmm
dominate, and he
Right,
was
exactly.
he was dominant. Like you could tell he
Dominant, right,
was like the best player on the field.
right,
South Dakota State, big rival of the Bisons, North Dakota State. I mean
right.
North Dakota Bisons. Um, but like he had some sick one hand grabs. I mean he looked like a seasoned pro. I think
hmm
he'd have to. Like he impressed like the small limited amount of practices he had at the Senior Bowl. Got injured, had a hamstring injury. But if you think about it, the Eagles were sniffing hard. They sent our tight ends coach was
Hmm.
at his pro day, and Dallas got a. I hate to say Dallas,
Let's
he,
call him D.
but he's actually a Packers fan, so he's a
Okay,
Packers fan.
that's I'll take
Um,
it. I mean, it
well,
makes sense though. Again, right? Like the Eagles are doing a great job of checking all of their bases and making sure that they're looking at prospects that can contribute. And you don't want to be sitting on the board, pass on somebody you could have done your homework on, and end up missing out on a really good player. So again, it makes sense. I just don't know that you take him. Like I don't think it makes sense for the Eagles with Ertz if they still have a long term plan for him in mind. If they're looking at, okay, we can get out of his contract in a year and move on from Zach Ertz, okay. And then this is a sort of low impact way, right? I don't even want to think about that, but if that's what you're doing, it makes sense in that regard. But if you're saying we're keeping Zach Ertz, we're going to keep his contract and draft a tight end that's going to demand playing time sooner than later. Um, are we going to go to a two tight end set offense? Are we now going to look to get rid of some of these wide receivers and like change up the offensive scheme? How is all of that going to play out? I think it's a lot easier to see and project some of the other players we have on the list versus go dirt, just because tight end is a position that we know is like a strength of ours, especially off a breakout season for Ertz where he contributed pretty much all the way through to the Super Bowl.
yeah,
So, again, if hey, listen, if you're getting out of that contract, it's a business. If you think that he can be somebody that can fill that role for a much cheaper price, okay. But if that's not the case, I don't know about it.
yeah, and he didn't have an official team visit. He had a
Mhm.
combine meeting with the
Okay,
Eagles.
right,
But for real, it was a exercise of the draft mind.
right,
We sat here and tried to like come up with guys that would kind of fit in that range, and
right,
it took some time to talk it out, but we got it done. Eagle fans
definitely,
out there, we want to know who your prospects are. Uh,
right.
get- hey, everybody has their own flavor of prospects. You guys give us your takes. I want to see them in the comments.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely, man. We want to hear what you think. Like you said in the very beginning, Gail, this may initially be unpopular because we're not talking about the exact same people everybody's hearing already. But again, like we took into consideration who could actually be there at 32, and then on top of that, like what kind of value did they have for the short and long term for the Eagles? As the Eagles just knowing how we in this front office is very forward thinking. There are contracts on the horizon they could be getting out of or could be looking to get out of. And so I think that this list is a representation of that more so than it is, hey, these are the 10 best guys. Because again, we could have thrown some offensive tackles on here, but most of them probably won't be there or maybe rank lower than some of these other guys that we mentioned.
yeah, I mean, if we're gonna Tyrell Crosby out of Oregon, a guy who's been mentioned, I mean, I could see it. I could see it,
Yeah,
especially if they move back in the second round.
right.
But there's guys that they could. I mean, I said on our last podcast that offensive tackle would be the most Eagle thing to do.
Right.
Last year, I said defensive end would be the most Eagle thing to do because
Okay.
it just is what it is. But it's gonna be interesting, man.
Yeah,
Any
absolutely.
any final thoughts, Mel?
Um, no, one thing I want to say, Jalen Samuels, like I've been rallying around Jalen Samuels for the longest time as a prospect. I would love to see him in Eagle Green. Other than that, like I think again, this list comprised of people that can contribute, make sense, and also from a value standpoint, can help the Eagles stay competitive, and keep that Super Bowl window open. I'm glad. Hey, listen, we're about to go to our first draft as Super Bowl champion, so it's better than
Yeah,
that.
yeah, man. Hey, man, you're holding up the torch for Jalen Samuels,
I'm
man.
holding up the torch.
We talking
All I
about
want to
first
say
round
is
picks,
this.
and you're bringing him up.
All I want to say is this. His comp, man, and it sounds crazy, but if you watch him, he's very similar to Alvin Kamara. isn't as explosive in the intermediate, like the short area explosion. When we talk about how he can contribute and all the different ways that he can play, and even their body type and size, ran the exact same 40-yard dash. You know, very close. And so I feel like a creative person, Doug Peterson, could do some really amazing things with Jalen Samuels. So I'm on that bandwagon, man. So just wanted to throw that one out there. That's it,
Wow,
though.
that's mad love. I mean, Jalen Samuels, a mid-round prospect, I
Yeah.
fell in love with after seeing he's a jack of all trades,
Right.
a Swiss Army knife, and he's a football player. Like some guys,
Right.
you just see they're a football player. It's good to have players like that on your roster,
Yep.
a la Trey Burton.
Exactly.
Um,
Exactly.
but that's a talk for another day. Maybe with
Yep.
you,
We're gonna hold
our
on.
mid-round prospects.
Yep.
Uh,
Had
uh,
to throw that out there,
yeah,
man. You
yeah,
know, I had to
man.
throw the love out.
Hey, Mal, where can they find you on Twitter?
So you can find me at Write What You Love. So that's WRITEWHAT, the letter ULOVE, because I write what I love, which is for Fourth and John. Um, and also, yeah, man, catch me on the Fourth and John website, occasionally on the podcast, and hopefully we'll continue to do some more of these.
Yeah, man. And for you draft heads out there, Fourth of John will be having a draft party this coming Thursday. And if you want to find me on Twitter, I'm at Eagle Sessions, talking football, writing memes, talking Eagles football 24/7. It was great talking with you, Mal.
Same, man. Have a great weekend.
All right, y'all. We'll see y'all soon.